part, you're looking at kind of a specific time that you're doing that. You can actually do it with a transactional as well, but there's a lot of, you know, coding behind that you might have to do. So let's get away from the slides and actually go to a demo. And excuse me, I'm going to go.
Thomas, real quick, do you want questions to be asked right away, or keep it to the end?
Sure, they can ask them. What's up?
Sean, go ahead.
I think Andy already answered me in chat, but I was saying that generally denormalized is better for reporting and normalized is better for like your transactional.
It depends.
Like the rule of thumb.
Yeah, I mean, you could go. You know, I've been around. I'm old. You know, I've been around IT over 30 years now. In '89, I started COBOL programming, and you know, I used to be animate about it. You saw my nickname, like, you know, database normalization nut. You know, crazy about dimensions. I get into this mindset where I get set. This is how I'm going to do something, and I get smushed almost every time. So, you know, it does help and it does speed it up, but there's situations that sometimes, you know, the other path is the way to go. You know, transactionals today, I mean, you see a lot of NoSQL coming around where they're just stuffing stuff into JSON. It freaks me out. I'm like, how do they do this? It's not transactional no more. How do you extract that? But they're doing it. You know, they're creating these data lakes and data swamps, and you know, now I hear about a data lake house. So there's so many things around, but the general rule, yeah, normalize a relational database and denormalize your reporting. And that's what dimensional modeling is all about. Really, if you read the Kimball books, what happened 20 plus years ago was it was hard to get a data warehouse created. So the dimensional modeling kind of singled it down to a fact and some dimensions, and we'll talk a little more about this, that they could quickly get a reporting out without having to do the whole data warehouse. And then they call them data marts, and so you create multiple data marts, and then there's something called conformed dimensions, which then you get your whole picture of your data warehouse. So if you want to think about dimensional modeling, it was to get work done quicker than the whole data warehouse objective. And we'll go into that a little bit more. Is there another question?
That's it. That's the only question so far.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
So here I am, Mr. You know, I'm just learning T-SQL, and I figured out how to do a sum or something like that. And I'm like, I can write T-SQL now. What do you want, boss? And he said, hey, I want to report my sales order number, your subtotal, and total due. Bingo. I produce the boss a report. And he's like, Thomas, you're really a good, you know, developer. Can you give me that for the year 2014 and sum it by that particular report year? I'm like, no problem, boss. There's your result. You know, I write this quick query that joins the sales order header with the detail by the order ID, and then I put a where clause. But if you notice, I'm using a function for the day to get the year out, right? And so if you know anything about performance tuning, you put a function on the left side of the view, it's going to do a full table scan. But I'm not worried about that because I'm just trying to satisfy the report for my boss so I can look good, right? So I'm creating this, and one day he says, man, that one for 2014 works great, but how about you give me all the years that are in the database? I'm like, no problem, dude. Put a group by in there, you know, remove the where clause, and I get another report. Thomas, you're a genius. And I mean, my head's getting big now, you know. I love that report you did for me with all those years. Can you also add in the product in there? No problem, boss. It's right here, man. How about too, when you do that, when you actually put the year in there as well? You know, no problem, right? Another report, another group by. I mean, I'm cooking, you know. I'm like, I'm a great report writer. And then the day comes again. You know, that report looks really good, but you know, I really want the salesperson in there. So I'm like, okay, well, let me get that query I had before, take this out, add a little join here to it. You know, now I'm cutting and pasting code from another query. You know, I'm uncommenting things out, and there's my salesperson, you know, and I'm cranking along, and I'm just spitting these things out, you know, left and right. I go, man, there's got to be an easier way to do this. And then the ultimate one comes in and says, hey, man, can you cross tab? Today it's called pivot. Back in the day, it was called cross tab. Can you cross tab the gears across and do it by employee in all those subcategories you had for me before? And I end up, finding this function called pivot inside of T-SQL. And I'm like, I am a genius. Look at the stuff I'm creating. But the requests become greater and greater and greater. And I've got all this individual T-SQL code. You might even see this in some of your environments that get Tableau or Power BI, and they're just plopping the T-SQL in there. And everybody runs a report like at 9 a.m. or 8 a.m. in the morning. The DBA gets alerts that there's, hundreds of blocking. You're on the source database, and then no one can enter data. And then the server locks up, because they forgot to put a max memory setting in it, You think there's got to be a better way to do that. And that's where dimensional modeling comes into play here. So you look at, an OLAT, a transactional system ER diagram, and it's enormous. So this is the one that we're working with right now. And I really did this to kind of scare you, like, oh crap, I don't want to look through that whole thing. How would you like having to create this as well, And this is, someone did this for the AdventureWorks database, which is a free Microsoft database. Anyone could download it and play around with it. But really, this is what we're looking at. We're just looking at the subsection of sales with the production, which is your product, and the person, which is your salesman. So it's not as much as what I originally showed you. I did that just for the fear factor part of it. But again, we still have a lot of joins here, especially if you look down here on the product. We want to get this product down here where we're not having to do all these joins in order to get a detailed record. I'm trying to find my detail, which is coming down to my, well, actually it kind of goes around. It goes to the special offer, and then it comes down to the product. So there's a lot of joins there. This is the header, this is the detail, this is the special product offer, and then it finally gets the product. And then I got to figure out the different attributes I need from the product. So it becomes real messy to do this in a transactional database. And so on comes along this dimensional modeling. You're moving your data, hopefully incrementally out of your transaction database and into a dimensional model. And the common thing is what's called a conformed dimension. So now my product dimension over here is going to be related to many things. Facts for the order, facts for the inventory, and facts for the shipment. So I'm conforming, which means this one dimension conforms to various fact tables. And I'm going to show you a little bit more where it comes into play with multiple facts inside of a diagram. So what we're doing is trying to get all those product related columns into one dimension. We relate it to the facts, and in this case, we have orders, which is our transaction, our inventory, which is like a snapshot, and then our shipments, which is kind of like a snapshot, but maybe bordering on the cumulative type facts. But we all, no matter which fact we create, we have this one surrogate key join to this conformed dimension called the product. Now, a common one, which you don't see in your transactional database in the dimensional model, is called a date dimension. In the date dimension, there's a row for every date. Does not matter if you have a matching date in one of your transaction tables or what have you. This date dimension has a row for every single date. Why? You can put in there the month, the quarter, and the year as a column, and you don't have to use a function. So that date part, where we grab the year from the date, it's gone, because when you join with the date dimension, you just pull the year out of the date dimension column. You do it by an integer, it's a surrogate key. Some people do it by the date, but it's better. My preference is the date, and that date dimension. We'll look at an example to show you the value of it. Not only can you do year, quarter, and month, but you can also do like the first of the week, the first of the month. You can add additional things that are related to it. You can have a fiscal calendar versus I called it calendar, but really it's the current calendar. I'm trying to think of the term for it.
Julian?
Nah, I think it's just called calendar. So, but if you had a different fiscal year than your normal like day calendar, you could put that inside of the date dimension. You can see it over here. You can see it to the, where's my little drawer? You can see here calendar year versus fiscal year. So this could have a different value in it if you have some sort of accounting function you need to do. Not many people separate fiscal from calendar. I know Microsoft does, but a lot of governmental agencies do. But there's not a lot that change the fiscal from the calendar year. But you get the idea. The date is its own individual table, and we'll look at the joins for that as well. The other thing in the dimension is something called a slowly changing, and I'm just looking at type 2, but there's a type 3 and there's a type 5 or 6 that some people use. But what it does is as you're populating this, the price changes. And you want to keep a historical record of that price. So this slowly changing will track the price. You get a new row for the same product, but certain slowly changing attributes will have a different value. It doesn't matter because when you roll up to the common attribute, product name, category, subcategory, it still is able to produce the same results, even though you have a different product key inside of it. And hopefully we'll see one of those examples when we look at the data. Now the fact is that the first thing is the surrogate keys. It used to be in the original Kimball, your combination of fact keys was your primary key. And then once that was when disk space and speed were kind of limited, probably 15, 20 years ago. But today, you know, in the case of this example, really my primary key is a sales order number plus the line number. Even though the combination of these keys can be unique, I could still key it off of order number and line number. But you want your surrogate keys, which if you notice here, you know, it says product key, you know, so I'm calling it product key here. But in the product dimension, you see this product alternate key. Well, that's the ID from my business unit. So say, for instance, we're using one transactional system and we get a new transactional system. That ID might be different than the original one. So you're actually getting a new row in it, but that product name is the same. Okay, so go ahead.
Yeah, so product alternate key here might be like the old system's product key. Got it.
Right. So the first system we use is called product ID. The second system we use calls it product number. So what do? Do you add a new column just because the new system calls it different? Or maybe just call it product alternate key, and that's indicated of the business key from your source system. Or you could be getting data from two different sources into one data mart. And so the idea is maybe don't label it exactly like your source system. Give it a business name, you know, category. It might be different in certain systems that you might be using. So the idea behind here is to think, what is the business is going to call this, you know? And for this one, they just pick, you know, alternate key. If you notice here, though, they use promotion ID and ID, almost all the rest are ID. Well, no, look, customer alternate key. So it can vary depending on your system. But the idea is the business key. You might call it product business key. Yeah. That'll be just a generic term for it. So the second thing is our measures. Now we skipped the keys for brevity, but the next thing is the measures in here. And that's these order quantity to, you know, order quantity down to sales amount. There's one other thing, and I don't have a mention of on the slide, but if you look here, there's actually a carrier tracking number and a customer PO number. So in this case, they decided not to create a dimension for the order. Probably you might want to do that. Some people might call it a junk dimension. And it's to help keep the size of the fact table slimmer. But in this case, they actually put it within there. The problem with that is you might be repeating that, even though we're denormalized. It still might cause this table to be a little chunky, you know, and that might not be the idea behind what you want to do. But that conformed dimension, the product. Now we have a fact table where we have internet sales and we have reseller sales. But in the case, the internet sales has a customer, whereas the reseller has a reseller. So this table down here for the reseller sales won't have a relationship to it. That's not a conformed dimension. It's one unique to the fact table itself. So don't be scared of that. The problem with it is when you combine it in a dimensional model or an analytical database, it's possible someone tries to grab a customer attribute and put it against reseller, and they get no data, or they get the total sum of everything that's inside of the fact table. So it's a training issue more than anything. So just be aware of that sometimes happens there. But those conformed dimensions in this case of reseller versus internet is our date, product, sales region, and a couple more. So let's go ahead and look at a demonstration of this. Before I start building something, what I want to do is show you those tables. So here's my product. And if I were coming from the source system, these are the joins I'm needing to get some of the data. And what you'll notice in some of them are their nulls, okay? So when you're populating through your ETL, you might want to put some logic in here similar to this, is null, NA to size. So what I can do is in my dimensional table, I'm not putting null like it's missing, I'm actually putting the NA inside of there. So that's an example of the ETL. Here, we're actually grabbing the different internet sales. I didn't want to put this first one in there. Let me take that out. And so here is actually the fact table itself of internet sales versus fact sales. And you can see the customer key here. You can see the reseller key here. So in these two, queries, we have something that's a little different. I think that's why they separated the two, even though from source, it comes from the same thing. So when they separate the orders, there is a column in here called online order flag. So in our query, we're actually producing a column that's going to tell us, where is that at? After total view, there's total view here. So we're reseller versus internet. So it's actually same source, but we're splitting it into two facts. Someone wants a data mart of internet sales, and the other one wants one of reseller sales. And again, these are queries from our source system where you got to join the header with the detail, with the offer product, and with the product. Now, if I want to do that in the dimensional model, I'm going to do a select. I'm going to say from DBO fact, oops, in the wrong database.
Thomas,
Yes.
question. So you talked about like we end up with kind of these two marks for internet sales versus for resellers. Why wouldn't you have, say, a dimension of like type of seller, and then they're either an internet or a reseller?
You can do that, and it's a preference. But we're going to build a model in analysis services in a second, and I'm going to show you how we can put them together. All right, so we're writing a query here. We're going to get it from our fact internet sales. I'm going to alias it, and I'm going to do an inner join on my dim date, and I'm going to alias it OD because this is going to be the order date relationship. So in our fact tables, we have an order date, a ship date, and a due date. So this is the actual one we want to do reporting against. So that's the only one that's a little odd that you don't have the same name for. But in this case, I can go into that dimension, grab the year, right? And go to the fact, get my sales amount, and do a little sum around it. And then end it with a group by. And bingo, I got that same query that we were doing earlier in our reporting. And now to join it with another dimension, dim product, P on P dot, guess what? Product key equals F dot product key. And now I'm adding to the year, the P dot category. Very simple, very clean. And as I go through it, I could just add more and more of those dimensions. My keys are usually always the same. So I did the date one first to show you that's probably the only one that your naming might be a little bit different. But in this case, my sales territory is there. And now I'm pretty much adding the sales territory country.
So now as you're going in the earlier example, every time the boss asks for something else, that's really just becoming another inner join line.
Right. It's a lot simpler, a lot cleaner. But we're building the dimensional model, and now we're going to put it in an analytical database. And you can see all the bells and whistles that are really cool. But this is the idea behind most of this. And if you want these queries, I can give them and let y'all download them so you can test it against an AdventureWorks database if you want. But let's go back to the slide and let's talk about building a model. So the dimensional model, I'm trying to convince you, is the way to go. Why? Well, in analysis services or Power BI, you can build a model. You can import the data or do a direct query. The import puts it inside of the model, and you have to schedule refreshes. The direct query will actually execute the T-SQL on the database. There's an additional work in there that you need to configure a date table to make sure that you can do what's called time intelligence, month to date, quarter to date, year to date. It's all functions in DAX that you can use. And then you go and create measures on the facts, and then you clean up the fact because you don't want to display everything inside of a fact table. Importing into memory is usually the best. Where you do a refresh, you can select the tables, write the queries, you can filter before importing. This is an old picture. Today it's what's called Power Query. And then the tables pretty much display kind of like a spreadsheet. And we'll see that. When we get to the date dimension, we're going to clean it up. We're going to set the date type. We're going to create a year, quarter, month, date hierarchy. And then we're going to order the month name by the month number. Other dimensions we're going to shows concatenating the first and last name to give it a customer name. Since the sales territory is kind of confusing, the attributes, we'll put them into a hierarchy to make it easier for your end user. And then hopefully we'll see an example of one of these slowly changing dimension values. I'm not sure if I can find the exact one. And then we'll also see what we can do with what's called the related idea with a snowflake. So product, subcategory, category. Let's go ahead and do the demonstration of this. And I'm in Visual Studio. This is the SQL Server Data Tools. It's 2017, and I'm just going to create a new project. I want the tabular. Oh, am I on? Wait, hold on a second. Yeah, I'm in 2009. I want to be in 2017. Hold on. It's a lot easier in here without 2019, they changed the menus. So it's I want to make it a little bit simpler for y'all. So I'm gonna create a tabular model, and give it a name, frame demo. I'm just gonna keep it in there. It's gonna create a folder for me. And one of the first things it's asked you is, do you want to use the integrated workspace? So this will actually spin up an analysis services engine and put it in memory for you. Or if you have analysis services installed, you can pick the server that has that particular thing. There's also various versions. It's interesting, we're in 2017, and it still lets us create a 2019 version of it, and even an Azure analysis services of it. So we're creating a solution which creates a project, which then creates what's called the model BIM file, business intelligence, something. They used to have a name for this versus the multi-dimensional, but I'm drawing a blank. But basically what I've got here is a different way, a tabular model explorer that helps me organize things. The first thing I'm gonna do is go to data source, and I'm gonna import from a data source. I'm gonna do it from a SQL database, that same one we were just looking at. I provide the server name, and I can actually type in the table name or the database name here, or I could just leave it blank, and it's going to ask me to get a name and password. I'm sure y'all might be able to figure out what I just used. Not too secure on mine. And I'm just going to pick that database. So I don't have to put the database name in. I can actually select it from a list once I connect to that server. Same thing if this database was in Azure or AWS, you just connect to it. So a nice thing here is I'm going to go grab those two fact tables, fact internet sales and fact reseller sales. And then over here in the bottom, select related tables. I click that and it grabs all my dimensions that have foreign keys. Otherwise, I got to pick them and put the relationship myself. I'm going to take off this product SF. That's the, I'm going to leave it, Snowflake. And what happens is, though, my product is related to subcategory and to category. So I'm going to have to select those two, and I'm going to remove the promotion one off of here, not to confuse it. But there's that dim reseller, that's for reseller sales, and there's that dim customer, that's for internet sales. So those are two separate that aren't conformed, but the rest of these dimensions are related. The fact internet sales reason is a many-to-many example where you have more than one sales reason for a sale. So if you know about many-to-many or curious, there's actually an example of it. We won't get that complicated. I won't do any transform data. I'm just going to pull it all in here, and we're just going to start cleaning it up. So in our diagram, first thing it's going to do, since I said import, it's going to go grab all the data from those tables. So it's good not to hook up to your production system because you might have millions of rows, and it's going to try to put all that in memory. Get about a 10-to-1 compression with analysis services or Power BI, because it does column store type storage rather than your row by row. But it's still not a good thing to pull in all your data. Here, I mean, we only have 300,000 rows, so it's not as bad. First thing is you notice that the tab selection on the bottom. That's kind of like your little Excel spreadsheet. Try to make it similar to that. So I can go through each one of these. If I click on it, then I get a set of properties over here, where I can just rename some of this stuff. So I can take the word fact off of it. I can highlight columns, right click on them, hide them from the client tools so those people can't see it. I can go to a column like sales amount, and in the upper right here, I got a little summation. I can create a sum. It creates my first measure down here, sum of sales amount, and I can just come up here and rename it like that. And I might even want to hide the rest. Here's that carrier and customer PO number. I could just right click on these and delete them from the model itself. So what I'm basically doing here is I'm cleaning up everything. I'm getting to the fact reseller sales. Where am I at? Not letting me delete that. That's interesting. Well, we'll keep going. I'll go to dim customer. Oh, I still can't change it. Let me find out what happened here. I'm gonna just go. Oh, let me step back. Since that wasn't working well. In the bottom right down here is where I'm going. There's a grid view, and then there's a diagram view. So because of those foreign keys, when I go to my diagram view, I could see all the join. There's my category, subcategory with my product dimension. See if I can, why can't I rename that? Oh, that's the ID, dummy. So here's my category. Here's my subcategory. I see my relationship. They actually double click on it and see some properties. It's a many-to-one, and the direction is from subcategory to category. My product. And what I want to pull in here is there's my internet sales. Here's my customer, which is only related to internet sales. Here's my date, which is a conformed dimension, as well as product. And I pulled in one too many tables. We'll get rid of that. My sales territory, and what do we have over here? Reseller sales, and dim employee, which is our sales. So for instance, that employee table is really sales person. The client, the user, doesn't want to see keys, you know, so you can highlight these keys. I'm just using my control key. I'm clicking on all those in every one of those dimensions. And I could do like a batch update, hide from client. So I can use the control key to do that. The big thing I wanted to show here, I'm gonna delete this guy. And what that's gonna cause is I'm gonna lose my relationship with back sales. But just to show you how easy this is, I can easily grab product key over here and drag it to product key in my dimension and release it. Now I've created that same one that the foreign key should have saw. But since I pulled in the other dimension, it picked that one instead. Again, I can hide these keys, but over in the middle here, and this is why I put it this way, here's my conformed dimensions. So what does that mean? You know, what does it mean that it's conformed? That means if I pull in any measure over here from internet sales, put it next to some measure from reseller sales, and pull one of these columns out, I'll get the value from both of those fact tables related to what I'm slicing and dicing from. Okay, so what we're going to do that, I'm going to go back to the grid view in the bottom right. I'm going to go to my fact reseller sales. And just like I did a summation in internet sales, I'm going to do one inside of reseller sales. So I'm going to call this reseller sales. And over in the top here is something called Analyze in Excel. So since this is in memory, this analytical database is now in memory being designed. I can click on that and Excel is going to make a connection to that analytical database. If you remember that preview part, I was slicing and dicing or showing drillable pivot tables in Excel. So here's my internet sales. Here's my reseller sales. And if I go grab city, well, this is a good example of the non-conform. My customer is only related to my internet sale. It's not related to reseller sale. There's some configuration you do in the background to say ignore that type of stuff. It's a little more, you know, advanced. But the idea here is if I go find one of these conform dimensions, now I can see all my years and all the summations, including totals. And guess what else I can do? Guess. I can come over here, do a total sales. It's typing up here if y'all can't see that. It's my DAX formula. I can say internet sales plus reseller sales. And just by creating that, developing, I can come back in here, go to data, refresh all, and I'll see total sales over here. Guess what? When I pick that, now I get a line item that includes the summation of the internet and reseller sales. So Sean, when you're asking the question, why would you separate it? Well, your analytical database can still combine them for you. Very simply, that was hardly any work I had to do there. And it didn't even put the currency, right? Well, I'm like, that's ugly. I'm gonna change currency, flip back, and there it is, you know? So now we're building in this analytical database, analysis services, same engine that's in Power Pivot, as well as Power BI, and even the Power BI service today. I can build some other stuff. For instance, on that customer, we'll go back to the grid, we'll clean up the customer. I could put an extra column out here. You could do this in your code if you want to, but I'm typing up here. I'm going to build a column that's going to combine the last name with a comma and the first name. I'll rename the column. Then I can go over to those columns over here, highlight them, which birth date probably shouldn't be displayed. And I can just say hide from that particular thing. Watch this too. I'm gonna highlight some more columns. Marital status to compute distance. Over here in the properties, there's a display folder. I can say demographics. And with the remainder columns, I can put geography. Now watch what happens when we switch to Excel. Remember, we saw a customer here over on the, I'm over here on the right. And as I scroll down, there's a bunch of columns just listed. When I refresh, now that customer has 2 folders where it's organized with just the customer name by itself. See that? So you're cleaning up your quote client view of these tools. The last thing we'll do is we'll switch back to there and we'll go to the diagram. I'm going to show you some cleaning up of the date dimension. Again, I still haven't done this, but I need to go to this table menu choice, go to table, date, and mark this as the date table. What that does is it finds the unique column within that data that is of a date data type. And now this particular table, along with any fact it's joined to, can have time intelligence functions performed on it. Year to date, month to date, quarter to date, last, previous year, same period. You use all these time intelligence functions. But the interesting thing here is I want to clean some of this up. You know, I'm just renaming some of the columns. I'm hiding some of the columns. I'm calling this month instead of English month. Now on that month, if you remember me talking about this, there is a sort by here. So if I were to display the month right now, it's sorted by the alphabetical month. But here I could change it to say sort by month number of year. And now that one's done. I could hide that one. To rename this quarter. Rename this one year. And now I'm going to create a hierarchy. I'm going to right click on year, create hierarchy, call it year, quarter, month, day, and I can add these other items to it. Now watch, we're going to switch back to Excel. I'm going to do my refresh. Might lose some stuff because I've been changing the model. And instead of picking the year, I'm going to pick that little hierarchy, okay? When I pick that hierarchy, where'd it go? One of the rows. Now I can drill into a year, a quarter, and then a day. So all that now is encompassed in that model. Again, I'm deploying this, it's in memory, but I can deploy this to a server that almost any analytical tool can connect to, and they don't have to build the quote T-SQL or whatever language they use to do that sort of grouping, aggregation, and so forth. Is there a reason I'm using 2017 instead of 2019? Yes, 2017 has the menu choices, model, table, column, and then in 2019, there's a new column called extensions. You got to go extension, tabular, table, and so forth. It's just easier to demonstrate this in 2017 than 2019. But you can use it. It doesn't matter. Someone else said, I think we will use live connection with SSAS. Now, live connection, there's various terminology that's being used. It's real confusing. Microsoft loves to confuse people with terminology. We have a model here. I'm going to highlight model. And if you notice down here, it says direct query mode. Okay. I'm going to switch here to Power BI. And when I go to Power BI and I say get data and I say analysis services, what I'm doing here is a live connect. Okay.
Right.
So I'm building this in analysis services, which is compiling the analytical database, and then I do a live connection to it rather than an import from my reporting tool, so that all it's doing is sending DAX statements to my database and returning that data faster. I don't have to do any sort of refreshes on inside of Power BI. But that's the difference between the term direct query
and live connection.
Yes, yes.
Right,
It's
right.
very confusing. I mean, I don't want to get too much detail in it, but we could do an advanced one day, and I'll go through a lot of the
Sure.
detail.
Can I
I'm
ask a
confused.
stupid question?
Yes.
Can I? Yeah. We can do all this stuff in Power BI itself. Why do you want to use analytical service? Sorry.
Great question. I'm on premise. I don't have a subscription to Power BI in the service. I don't
Yes.
have a Power BI Pro license. I
Mhm.
want to do everything on premise. The IT department, like I was at a bank, they weren't going to use the cloud.
Right.
I had to do this on premise. So this is analysis services on premise. And then I can connect the Power BI report server, live connect to the analysis services database.
Okay.
But you're right. Everything's going to cloud and you probably should do it there. But let me go back to when I right click on the project over here,
Yes.
when I right click and go to properties, you can actually use today an XMLA endpoint, put it in the server name, and deploy the same thing to Power BI service. You can do it to Azure Analysis Services as well as a Power BI data set. Kind of.
Oh, okay.
So you can do that. This is just the development environment. When you do it in Power BI, now you got to manage a data set in Power BI with a report,
Mhm.
whereas this don't have a report.
That
So when
is
you
correct.
deploy
Mm.
from Power BI, deploy a report. The really confusing thing is Microsoft has made the analysis services engine in Power BI service more powerful than the Azure analysis services, more powerful than on-premise analysis services. So, I mean, they're trying to drive you to that. That's enough ranting. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
But I'm a right click and deploy just to show you all that. And it's going to actually do that gathering of data, and it's actually deploying it to a service engine that other people can connect to. Most of the development I've done so far in Excel display is all in memory on my local thing, even though a tabular model is in memory, even if you deploy it to a server. The point is, we're able to get that dimensional model. Why do I use it? Because it works best with facts and dimensions in an analytical database, and it's easier for those relationships, and you don't have to put too much. You notice here, I haven't put a where clause on anything. I don't have an additional on, two keys, and active equals true. I can put the active in a dimension and then give it to the user to turn on and off. So you're limiting all the slicing and dicing to the tool once the whole thing is built. I think we're getting low on time, so let me go back to the slides. I think y'all get an idea of the different functionalities you could do here. The only one I don't think I showed was the slowly changing, which maybe you could just trust me on that. But other things you can do in here is you can create measures, almost any aggregate. We talked about the time intelligence. You can actually do KPIs. You can do some comparisons, even with another table. There's two things you hear about DAX. One is an inline computed column versus a measure. A measure is kind of with the whole data set, whereas a computed one is like the concatenation of the last and first name that we showed. So you might see some of that. It's different DAX syntax. There's a lot more complication. You can do the gross profit margin. And I'm going to do that for you really quick. I'm going to go up to my internet sales. Oops. I'm down here on internet sales. And basically, I need one more column. I need to get my product cost. I need to sum that up. And now I'm down here on the bottom. I'm creating measures. I'm going to create gross profit margin equals that sales amount minus the cost divided by sales amount. And now you'll see a value there. I'm going to change the format from general to percentage. I'm going to right click on that and go to create KPI. My absolute value is going to be 0.41. And just for display sake, I'm going to keep this really close so I can see my upper and lower. And I'm going to change my display. I'm going to click OK. I'm going to switch back over to Excel. I'm going to do my little refresh, which it didn't change anything. That's good. And you'll notice now I've got some KPI area. So drill into that. I'm going to take my internet sale. I'm going to take reseller and total off. And now I'm going to go and show you my values on there, my goal, and then my status. So now you can see I can get a different color for that particular, goal, that internet GPN. Well, it looks like it's not. It looks like it's not calculating right. Let's let me come out of here. Let me go back. I should be getting a variety of values, huh? Yeah, there we go. I must have picked the wrong. Oh, I had internet sales on there. Yeah. There we go. Now let me grab my, I just selected the wrong thing in the display. Let me go for my goal and status. It still did it, didn't it? No. Oh, that's the goal. The goal is 41. Sorry. I picked the goal last time. So as I drill in, now I can find, if I'm yellow, I can keep drilling in until I see something that's red. And I can see on July 6th, I had a below what I wanted my gross profit margin, but all these greens say I'm doing good. And of course, because I'm in an analytical database, I can add more to this. I can go in and find my category name, place it on top. And now I can even get more details of where that is. The bikes probably perform, or the accessories seem to perform better than the bikes. Well, you might say, well, let's sell more accessories. But if you go put the actual sales out there, you'll notice that the sales are so much bigger here than they are for accessories. So it might not be a good idea to concentrate on accessories, even though your margin's larger, because you don't get as much sales, right? So you want to kind of concentrate on what's making the most money as far as bikes are concerned. So being able to have all that data in here is really, really helpful. All right, so we'll go through the rest. Also inside of here, you can have perspective. So even though we've combined internet and reseller sales into one, we can create perspectives where when they connect to just reseller or just internet sales. And if we had even a third one like inventory, we can actually select just the dimensions and facts that the person wants for that perspective. Partitions let you partition by, say, a date. And then you're only importing new data, which makes the processing, when I mentioned refresh, it kind of makes that faster. And now, even in the security roles, not only do you have row level security, but you can also control the objects that are displayed based on the person's role. So that perspectives gives you the ability to set multiple displays. Think of a perspective as like a view. Partitions is how can I incrementally load data, and roles is by an AD account, how can I control what somebody sees. Now we kind of saw a connection in Power BI. Go ahead.
So the partition, that's good for like you don't need to load the past 5 years worth of data every single time you're refreshing. You just want since the last refresh.
Yeah. So if I go right, so if I go into model, I'm going to go to one of the fact tables. I go to model, process. I can say process a partition versus the whole table or the whole thing. So I could go in and just process by default, not full, one partition, because I know it's the only stuff that got data updated inside of it. It'll save on my refresh schedule. Kind of looked at it in Power BI. I won't go into details of that. Just a couple other things I like to talk about at the end of this talk. Remember, there's other things about data warehousing, junk dimension, many to many. It's something to look at in healthcare, especially many to many. You do have to train end users on that. I've seen an information mart on top of a data vault. Information mart is a data mart like a dimensional model, except on a data vault design. You use Data Vault 2.0. And there's always Iman data warehousing, which is still around today. The other thing I want to talk about is the requirement. So this is a requirement from a healthcare company I had about inventory. And I concentrated a lot on this goal. Reduce the average inventory on hand per location, minimize the sales amount. And I was trying to build something where it was particularly measuring those things. And what happened is the gentleman that was in charge of that left, and then I got to talk to his boss, which is a VP. And this is what she said to me. She goes, Thomas, we want to ship the inventory directly to the patient. So instead of going from patient to location to nurse trunk to patient, I want to go from distributor all the way to the patient. I'm like, why do you want to do that? She goes, because that makes less inventory in my location. Well, good. So what you trying to do, like do smaller orders? It seemed like if you did a big order, you could save money. She goes, no. If I can put less inventory in a location, I can rent less square feet in a location. She goes, 600 locations times 100 square feet times $20 a square foot is $1.2 million a year in rent. I was like, oh, so building a data mart, and like we looked at internet sales and resales, that might not be the point of creating a dimensional model. You need to figure out from the end user, why are they doing this? Well, in her case, it was to save money. If you want to find me out on the internet, the Smiling DBA on Twitter, I got a blog, thomas-leblanc.com, and you can email me at smilingdba@gmail.com. I'm not sure if there were any more questions, but we're at 6:30, so I thought I'd stop.